Hey, so this is part 2, and if you haven't seen part 1, I recommend you do. Yeah, because I talk about the first 4 generations of starters, and in this video, I talk about the last 4. So if you wanna watch that video, be my guest. So without further ado, let's get into the first starter. Our first starter is Snivy, which evolves into Superior. Superior is pretty weak. It's never used. A lot of people says it's bad because of its awful moveset, only getting normal and grass moves. Pretty much meh stats, good defenses, good speed, and terrible everything else. It's a very confusing stat spread, so I'm not sure why anyone would use it. Up next, we have Oshawott, which evolves into Samurott. Samurott is pretty much just a pure water starter. It has some pretty decent coverage, having Mega Horn and Aerial Ace with Sword Stance, which can really mess up someone. But its stats are pretty good, having balanced stats across the board except for its bad speed, which kind of makes it pretty bad. Next up, we have Tepig, which evolves into Emboar. Now, a lot of people hate Emboar mainly because of its design, and I understand. But looking at its moveset, its best fighting move is Hammer Arm, but it also gets Assurance and Rollout, which are really good coverage moves, so I'll give it that. But looking at its stats, it has good HP, special attack, and attack, but that's pretty much all it has going for it. But in my opinion, the best Unova starter is Emboar. This is mainly because of its great coverage, and Samurott is a close second, but the fact that it has higher special attack than physical attack when all its coverage moves are physical attack is pretty bad. Next up, we have Chespin, which evolves into Chestnut, the Generation 6 grass starter. Now, Chestnut isn't the most popular pick, but its moves are not that good, having Hammer Arm, again, as its best fighting move, with Bite and Rollout, which are pretty good coverage moves. And that's pretty much it for it. But looking at its stats, it has some decent attack and defense, and that's pretty much it. Next on the list, we have Froakie, which evolves into Greninja. Now, Greninja is seen as one of the most offensively competitive threats in the metagame because of its move pool, which is good. It has psychic moves, it has Night Slash, Shadow Sneak, some pretty good moves all around. And looking at its stats, it seems to be a glass cannon, having great speed and great special attack. Next, we have Fennekin, which evolves into Delphox, spelled with PH instead of F for some reason. But Delphox is pretty good because of its great coverage, having Shadow Ball and psychic moves, I guess. But it has some pretty great stats. If you have to admit, no matter how much you hate Delphox, you have to admit that it has some pretty great stats. The best starter out of all the Kalos starters, in my opinion, is Greninja. This is mainly because of its Protean ability, which is obviously one of the best abilities in the game because, it gives it stab for everything. This is like the case with when Blaziken got speed boost. It just makes it super broken. Next up, we have Rowlet, which evolves into Decidueye. Now, Decidueye is my favorite of the Alola starters. However, it's not the best competitively, but its moves are pretty good, having good ghost moves, good flying moves, even with Brave Bird, and U-Tune for extra coverage. Now, looking at its stats, it has pretty good attack, special defense, and special attack. Next, we have Popplio, which evolves into Primarina. Now, a lot of people like Primarina, and I really like it because of the broken fairy type it has. And looking at its moves, it has some pretty good coverage with Icy Wind and, Moonblast. But looking at its stats, it's actually really good with amazing special attack and great special defense. Next up, we have Litten, which evolves into Incineroar. Now, Incineroar is a great competitive Pokemon because it has some pretty good moves, rock coverage, dark coverage. I mean, technically it has ghost coverage with Lick, but that doesn't technically count. And also fighting coverage, which is actually really good. Now, looking at its stats, it's really impressive, having great attack and great defenses, which is automatically amazing. The only thing it needs to work on is its speed. So out of all the Alola starters, I think the best competitively is Incineroar, mainly because it has the ability Intimidate, which automatically made it one of the best competitive Pokemon in VGC. For Galar's first starter, we have Grookey, which evolves into Rillaboom. Now, I used Rillaboom. It's pretty good, not the best. Its moveset is really dry, only having dark coverage, and that's pretty much it. And looking at its stats, it's not the most impressive, having solid defenses and good attack and HP. Next up, we have Sobble, which evolves into Inteleon. Now, I actually really like using Inteleon. I don't like his design, but using Inteleon is really fun. Its moveset is pretty good, having good coverage moves and Snipe Shot, which is also really good. But the main bad thing is its stats, because all of its coverage moves are physical attacks, and it's a special attacker. This is the same case with Samurott, which I think just makes it disappointing. Next, we have Scorbunny, which evolves into Cinderace. Now, I use Cinderace for a bit. It's pretty fun, mainly because Pyro Ball is the best signature move out of all of the Galar starters. And looking at its moveset, it has Bounce and Double Kick as coverage, which is pretty good. Looking at its stats, it has good attack and speed, which is actually really good for it. So in my correct opinion on which the best Galar starter is competitively is Cinderace. This is really because of its Libra ability, which just gives it stab for everything. Same with Greninja. This automatically makes it the best. Plus, it has the best signature move out of all of them. They're just the best. Now, a lot of you may be wondering why I'm not including the starters from Pokemon Scarlet and Violet, because at the time of uploading this video, they are already out. Well, they came out in November 18th, 2022, and I do not have the game of now because these videos take a little bit longer to make than you would think. So, I'm sorry I'm not making a video about them, but maybe I'll do a review once I finally play all of them, and then I'll review the starters, see which is the best. Thank you for watching the video. Honestly, the support that's been going through the channel so far has been very exhilarating for me, but I'm just very thankful. So thank you all, and I hope to see you next week for another great video of mine, hopefully.